I signed it because he was family. That's what I keep coming back to. Not because I didn't read it, though I didn't. Not carefully, not because I trusted insurance companies. I've never trusted insurance companies, but because Kyle was my son-in-law, married to my daughter Lauren for 9 years, father to my granddaughter Emma. It's just beneficiary updates, Stan, he'd said, spreading the papers across my kitchen table. Life insurance stuff. You know how it is. Emma's getting older, we're updating our estate plan. Your name needs to be on some forms as secondary. The documents were thick. Legal-size paper, small print, those little colored flags that said sign here and initial here. Why does my name need to be on your life insurance? Kyle smiled. That easy smile that had charmed Lauren, that made him successful selling luxury cars at the BMW dealership. You're Emma's grandfather. If something happened to both of us, God forbid, you'd be her guardian. The insurance company needs documentation. You know how bureaucratic this stuff gets. I did know. My wife Rita had died 2 years ago. The paperwork after her death had been endless. Forms and notarizations, and certified copies of things I'd never heard of. Where's Lauren? I asked. At yoga. She asked me to swing by and get your signature so we can file everything by Friday. The estate lawyer said we're cutting it close on the deadline. I picked up my pen, flipped to the first flag. Stanley Mercer in my careful handwriting. Then the next. Then the next. 17 signatures total. I never read what I was signing. 3 weeks later, I was declared dead. The first sign something was wrong came at my bank. I'd gone to TD Canada Trust on Granville Street to deposit a pension check, old-fashioned. I know, but I liked having the paper, liked talking to the teller. Made me feel less alone in the house that still smelled like Rita's Earl Grey tea. The teller, a young woman named Priya, who usually smiled and asked about my day, looked at her screen and frowned. Mr. Mercer, I'm going to need to get my manager. Is something wrong with the check? She didn't answer, just picked up her phone and spoke quietly into it. The manager, a man in his 40s, tie too tight, expression carefully neutral, appeared 2 minutes later. Mr. Mercer, could you come with me to my office? The office had glass walls. I could see other customers in line watching. There's been a notation placed on your account, the manager said, pulling up something on his computer. According to our records, this is awkward. According to our records, you're deceased. The account has been frozen pending estate settlement. I stared at him. I'm sitting right here. I can see that. But the notation was filed by, he scrolled. A Lauren Hoffman, lists herself as your daughter and executor of your estate. She provided a death certificate. It's dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago I'd been at Home Depot buying wood stain for my deck. Very much alive. There's been a mistake. Clearly. But I can't override this without documentation. You'll need to provide proof of identity. Contact the Ministry of Vital Statistics. Get the death certificate reversed. How did she get a death certificate if I'm not dead? That's a question for the authorities, Mr. Mercer. I walked out of that bank with my pension check, still in my wallet, and the sick feeling that something very wrong had started 3 weeks ago when I signed those papers in my kitchen. I tried to call Lauren from my car. Straight to voicemail. Her voice cheerful. Hi, you've reached Lauren. Leave a message. Lauren, it's Dad. Call me back. Something's happened with my bank account. They're saying, just call me. I tried Kyle next. Also voicemail. I drove to their house in Kitsilano. Big house, ocean view, the kind of place Kyle could afford after years of selling M5 Sang and X7S to tech executives. No one answered the door. Their neighbor, a woman I'd met at Emma's birthday party last year, was getting her mail. Oh Stan, I thought you were, Lauren said you'd been ill. Ill? She said you'd passed away. I'm so sorry, I would have sent flowers, but she said it was private, family only. When did she say this? The woman's face went pale. 2 weeks ago. We saw her in the driveway, and asked how you were doing, and she, oh my God, you're alive. I got back in my car and drove to a place I never thought I'd need. A lawyer's office. The lawyer's name was Marcus Osei, mid-50s, Ghanaian accent, reputation for taking on impossible cases. I'd heard about him from my neighbor, who'd used him in a property dispute. Let me understand, Marcus said, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Your daughter filed a death certificate, claiming you died 3 weeks ago. Your bank account is frozen. But you're very much alive, yes. And 3 weeks ago, you signed documents your son-in-law brought over. Documents, he said, were life insurance beneficiary forms. Yes. Do you have copies? No. He took them all when he left. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Mr. Mercer, I need to be blunt. What you're describing sounds like identity fraud and possible insurance fraud. If your son-in-law had you sign documents while claiming they were beneficiary forms, but they were actually something else, perhaps applications for life insurance policies naming you as the insured, then filed a fraudulent death certificate to collect, the room felt smaller, hotter. How much would a life insurance payout be? Depends on the policy. But for someone your age, healthy non-smoker, a $500,000 policy wouldn't be unusual. Maybe more if they took out multiple policies from different insurers. Can they do that? If they have your signature on the applications, your personal information, and a death certificate? Yes. Insurance companies process death claims every day. If the paperwork looks legitimate, they pay out. I thought about Kyle's smile, about the 17 times I'd signed my name, about Emma asking me to read her a bedtime story last month, her small hand in mine. What do I do? Marcus picked up his phone. First, we get ahead of this. I'm calling the RCMP fraud division. Then we're filing an emergency injunction to freeze any insurance payouts. Then you're going to tell me everything you remember about those documents. The RCMP officer was a woman in her 30s. Corporal Jennifer Hayes, Financial Crimes Unit. She sat in Marcus's conference room with a laptop and a recorder and asked me to start from the beginning. I told her about Rita's death, about Lauren and Kyle's visits afterward, how they'd been supportive, helpful, how Kyle had started asking about my finances, just making sure you're set up okay, Stan, how he'd recommended a financial advisor, helped me reorganize some accounts. Did he have access to your personal documents? Hayes asked. He helped me file some paperwork after Rita died, insurance claims, pension stuff. I gave him my social insurance number for the forms. Hayes exchanged a look with Marcus. What? I asked. With your SIN, your signature, and your personal information, he could apply for life insurance in your name, she said. Let me check something. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, clicked through databases I'd never heard of. Mr. Mercer, according to insurance industry records, there are 4 active life insurance policies listing you as the insured, issued by different companies in the past 6 months. Total death benefit $1.8 million. The number hit like a car wreck. Beneficiaries on all 4 policies. Lauren Hoffman and Kyle Hoffman. Joint. I never applied for those. You did, technically. These applications have signatures that will match yours. Medical questionnaires filled out, probably by Kyle using information he knew about you. The insurance companies had no reason to suspect fraud, and the death certificate. Hayes pulled up another screen, filed with BC Vital Statistics 2 weeks ago. Cause of death listed as acute myocardial infarction. Heart attack. Signed by a Dr. Ramon Gupta. I've never met a Dr. Gupta. I'd be surprised if Dr. Gupta met you either. We'll be looking into whether he was paid to sign a fraudulent certificate, or if his credentials were forged entirely. Marcus leaned forward. Have any of the policies paid out yet? 2 of them, totaling $900,000. Deposited into a joint account belonging to Lauren and Kyle Hoffman. On she scrolled. 5 days ago. I thought about my daughter, about teaching her to ride a bike when she was 6. About walking her down the aisle when she married Kyle. Can you get the money back? If we move fast, Hayes said. I'm freezing their accounts now and issuing a warrant. They arrested Kyle at the dealership. I wasn't there. Marcus advised me to stay away, But Hayes called me afterward to tell me how it went. He was in the middle of closing a sale on a 750i when we arrived. Tried to act confused, like he had no idea what we were talking about. Then his lawyer showed up and he stopped talking entirely. What about Lauren? Hayes paused. She's with Emma at her sister's place in Burnaby. We're executing a search warrant at their house now. Once we have evidence linking her directly to the fraud, we'll bring her in. Does Emma know about the arrest? Probably not yet. Emma was 7 years old, brown curls like her mother, obsessed with dinosaurs. Last time I'd seen her, she'd made me promise to take her to the Science World Tyrannosaur exhibit. Now I was the reason her father was in custody. Mr. Mercer, Hayes said gently, I know this is hard, but what they did, faking your death, forging documents, stealing close to $1 million, that's not a mistake, that's premeditated fraud. I know. We found emails between Kyle and someone claiming to be Dr. Gupta, negotiating payment for the death certificate. $15,000. Bitcoin. We're tracing the wallet now. And Lauren? We'll know more after the search. But Mr. Mercer, the beneficiaries were listed as joint. She would have had to sign documents, provide her own identification. At minimum she knew. I hung up and sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Kyle had spread those papers 3 weeks ago, and tried to understand how my daughter could do this. The search warrant team found evidence in less than an hour. Marcus called me with the update. They found copies of the insurance applications in Kyle's home office. All 4 policies. Your forged signatures match the ones on file with the insurers. They also found a burner phone with text messages coordinating the death certificate. Between who? Kyle and someone using a Vancouver number. We're subpoenaing the records, but the messages reference the certificate. The old man and timeline for payout. They were planning this for months. Stan. I closed my eyes. What about Lauren? That's where it gets complicated. They found her laptop. Email exchanges with Kyle about managing your dad's estate. But her lawyer will argue she thought you'd actually died, that Kyle lied to her too. Do you believe that? Marcus was quiet for a moment. The joint bank account where the $900,000 was deposited. She accessed it 4 times in the past week. Transferred $50,000 to a separate account in her name only. Spent $18,000 on a trip to Cancun booked for next month. That doesn't sound like someone grieving her father. It sounded like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Lauren quote. Sole lawyer arranged a meeting. Neutral territory. Marcus's office, both legal teams present. I hadn't seen my daughter since the arrest. Hadn't spoken to her since the bank rejected my pension check. She walked in looking pale, thinner, hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger than 41. She didn't look at me. My client wishes to make a statement, her lawyer said. A woman in her 50s. Expensive suit, the kind of lawyer you hire when you're facing serious charges. Lauren cleared her throat. Read from a paper in shaking hands. I didn't know what Kyle was doing. He told me you'd had a heart attack. That you'd died at home and he'd found you. I was devastated. I trusted him. When he said he'd handle the arrangements, I let him. I didn't question the death certificate. I didn't question the insurance payouts. I thought it was money you'd left for Emma's future. Marcus didn't even pause. Did you think your father had $1.8 million in life insurance? I didn't know the amount. Did you access the joint account where $900,000 was deposited? Kyle managed our finances. Did you transfer $50,000 into a personal account in your name only? Her lawyer put a hand on her arm. Don't answer that. I looked at my daughter, at the woman I'd raised. Did you come to my house, after you thought I died? Did you check on it? Wonder why there was no funeral, no obituary, no body? She met my eyes finally. Hers were wet but not crying. Kyle said you wanted cremation. Private, that it was in your will. I don't have a will. I didn't know that. You didn't ask, you didn't call my friends. You didn't check with the hospital. You just took the money. Her lawyer stood. This conversation is over. My client is grieving, and has been manipulated. I'm not dead, I said quietly. And she knew, or she didn't want to know. Which is worse? Kyle pleaded guilty 6 weeks later. Fraud over $5,000. Forgery. Uttering forged documents. Identity theft. The Crown prosecutor recommended 4 years. His lawyer made a statement outside the courthouse about financial pressures and poor judgment. Didn't mention the $900,000, or the fake death certificate, or the 17 times he'd watched me sign my name while lying to my face. Lauren was charged separately. Her trial was set for November. Marcus thought she'd take a plea deal. The evidence is overwhelming. The joint account. The transfers. The emails. Her I didn't know. Defense falls apart under scrutiny. What's the likely sentence? If she pleads, 2 years, maybe less with credit for time served and remorse. And Emma, social services is involved. If both parents are incarcerated, there's you. I hadn't thought that far ahead. Hadn't thought about what happens to a 7-year-old when her parents go to prison for faking her grandfather's death. She'd live with me? You're her next of kin. Unless you don't want. Of course I want her, but I didn't know how to explain to Emma why Mommy and Daddy wouldn't be coming home. How to explain that they'd tried to erase Grandpa for money. Getting declared alive again took longer than getting declared dead. I had to provide fingerprints, DNA, witness affidavits, appear before a judge with 2 pieces of government ID, and my original birth certificate. The Ministry of Vital Statistics treated me like I was trying to scam them, not the other way around. Fraudulent death certificates are a serious crime, the clerk said, as if I was the one who'd filed it. Finally, 3 months after Kyle's arrest, I got the official letter. The death certificate issued on date for Stanley James Mercer has been voided. All records have been corrected. My bank account unfroze. My pension resumed. My credit report stopped showing me as deceased. But some things stayed dead. Lauren pleaded guilty in October. Accepted a plea deal 18 months, eligible for parole after 6. Her lawyer emphasized her cooperation, her remorse, her role as a mother. I sat in the courtroom and watched my daughter apologize to a judge. She didn't apologize to me. Emma came to live with me 2 weeks later. Social worker dropped her off with a duffel bag and a stuffed triceratops she'd had since she was 3. "Grandpa, why can't I live with Mommy?" she asked that first night. I didn't know what Lauren had told her. Didn't know how much a 7-year-old should know about fraud and forgery and parents who fake deaths for insurance money. "Mommy made some mistakes," I said. "She needs time to fix them." "Is she coming back?" "Yes, but it'll be a while." Emma climbed into my lap. Too big for it really, but she did anyway. Daddy said, "You went to heaven with Grandpa." That's what broke me. Not the arrest or the trial or the lawyer meetings, but knowing Kyle had told my granddaughter I was dead while I was alive 10 minutes away. "I'm right here," I said into her hair. "I'm not going anywhere." The insurance companies wanted their money back. All $1.8 million. The 2 policies that had paid out $900,000 were being recovered through asset seizure. Kyle and Lauren's house, their cars, their accounts, everything liquidated. The other 2 policies, $900,000 still unpaid, were voided. The insurers were suing Kyle, Lauren, and Dr. Gupta, who turned out to be a real doctor, now under investigation for selling fake death certificates for fraud. I was named in the lawsuits, not as a defendant, as a victim, but it meant depositions, testimony, more lawyers. Marcus handled most of it. "They'll settle eventually," he said. "The insurers just want to make sure you weren't complicit." Complicit in faking my own death. It's happened. People stage deaths for payouts. They have to rule it out. It took 8 months, but they finally did. Concluded I was a victim of fraud, not a co-conspirator. Closed their investigation. I got a formal letter of apology from one of the insurers. It came with a check for $5,000, "For your trouble." I used it to set up a trust for Emma, money she'd get when she turned 18. Money from the mess her parents made. Lauren called from prison 6 months into her sentence. I almost didn't accept the call. But Emma was at school, and the house was quiet, and I thought maybe I'd hear something that made sense of it. Dad. Her voice sounded small, institutional. Thank you for taking care of Emma. She's my granddaughter. I know, I know you didn't have to. What did you think I'd do? Let her go into foster care? Silence. Then I'm sorry. For all of it. I know you don't believe me. I loved you, Dad. I still do. But Kyle said. He made it sound so easy. Said you'd never know. That the insurance was just sitting there. And we needed it and you wouldn't miss it because you'd be dead. I didn't think about what it meant. I just thought about the money. I looked out my window at Emma's bike in the driveway, pink with streamers. I'd taught her to ride it last month, running beside her until she found her balance. You get out in 8 months, I said. If you're lucky, Emma will be almost 9. She asks about you every week. I tell her you made mistakes. I don't tell her you signed paperwork declaring me dead so you could buy a vacation. I know. When you get out, you can see her. Supervised visits at first. If you prove you've changed, maybe more, but you don't get to live here. You don't get to pretend this didn't happen. I understand. Do you? Because I signed those papers, because I trusted you, because Kyle was family, because I thought you'd never hurt me. Her voice broke. I'm sorry. So am I. I hung up before she could say anything else. Emma's in 3rd grade now. Her teacher says she's doing well, making friends, reading above grade level, obsessed with fossils, and asking if we can visit the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Alberta next summer. I keep the court documents in a locked filing cabinet in my basement, all of it. The fraudulent death certificate, the insurance applications with my forged signatures, the plea agreements, the sentencing transcripts. One day Emma will ask to see them, ask what really happened, why Mommy went away, and I'll show her. Not because I want her to hate her mother, but because she needs to understand that signatures matter, that family doesn't always mean safety, that the people who are supposed to protect you can be the ones who erase you. Kyle gets out in 2 years, Lauren in 3 months. I changed my will last week. Everything goes to Emma. Held in trust until she's 25, managed by Marcus, not her parents. I added a clause. A single paragraph at the end. I leave nothing to my daughter Lauren Hoffman, as she has already demonstrated what my life is worth to her. This is not punishment. This is documentation. Some revenge is loud. Arrests and trials and prison sentences. Some revenge is quiet. A paragraph in a will that outlives you both. I keep a copy on my desk now, next to a photo of Emma and me at Science World, standing in front of the T-Rex she loves. Proof that I'm alive. Proof that I know exactly who tried to make me disappear. And proof that when I'm actually gone, years from now on my own terms, they'll get nothing but the truth.